Hey guys, Rollout here with LEGO Movie Optimus Prime version 2. The title might be confusing because this is technically my fourth version of Movie Prime, but if you recall, in the middle I decided to reintroduce it as a whole new Transformer because so much had changed, and therefore this is only version 2 somehow. It might not seem like a whole lot is different because in between I also did an instructions video where a few things had changed. Now even since then, a few more things are different, and I'd like to go over those. But first I want to mention one more time that at this point I almost consider it my own version of Optimus Prime. At a distance it looks a little bit like Movie Prime, but the closer you get, the more you realize that a lot of its details are either oversimplified or in some cases completely different, and over the years it's claimed its own identity. So I'd like to suggest that it's more of a movie-inspired Optimus rather than a representation. And with that out of the way, what has changed? First of all, the forearms are built a lot differently. They're a little bit more solid, and there's actually more of an implied hand underneath the armor. The shoulders are rebuilt as well. There's a lot more blue in there, which I think helps with the color blocking. The smokestacks are actually on pivots this time. They tilt outward a little bit, and I think that makes him look a lot more dynamic. And finally, since the very beginning, the head has pretty much been the same until now. I think the jumper plates add a lot of depth, and this new head design is a little bit more clean. Now, the biggest change I've made with this version of Prime is that I've added his weapons, as of Revenge of the Fallen at least, so let's take a look at all of those individually. First up is the basic ion blaster, which is sort of pipe-like in design. I guess it's implied that this is made up of like his gas tanks or something. Either way, I like the use of this Technic piece up front, and then you have this secondary barrel or sight on the top. I also like the gasket details on the side as well. I've built this in such a way so that it can be converted. One weapon can either be a left-handed or a right-handed gun, just like that. And this plugs into his hand by flipping this gray piece around, just like this. A second gun can store neatly onto his back. That way he can dual sling them, and I think that looks pretty good. With his Energon swords, you have a couple more options. As you can see, one of the swords and one of the guns can actually connect together, and then this whole thing is able to store onto his back. Of course, you can also store one of the swords back there on its own. As for holding them, he can wield them sort of like he does in Dark of the Moon, or, of course, you can integrate them more into his forearms. And now he's ready to take you all on! And then, last and probably least, I also threw together some battle hooks. These are very simple. There's a little bit of movement here, and they attach to his arms much the same as the swords. Both of these can actually store on his back, but they were only ever used like once, so they're awfully forgettable. But if you're in the market to rip off some Grindor faces, then there you go. Of course, his transformation is largely the same, with only a couple of significant differences, the first of which being these portions of his forearms here will actually rotate around to the front. Just like this. I want you to recognize that on this version, the forearms are actually symmetrical, and you'll see why that's possible here in just a moment. Most everything else is fairly familiar. The head comes down, the chest squeezes together, the waist rotates around, the hips collapse, these panels come up, and the front squeezes together as well. These come down, and then fold around the head. But at this point, we're actually going to set this down and bring in a couple of the weapons. one of his guns, and one of his swords. And these will plug together. Then this whole assembly will connect right underneath his head, just like this. And then using the gun, the arms will actually secure together and solidify the entire rear of the vehicle. Tidy everything up. And there you have Optimus in truck mode. As you can see, the added blue to his shoulders especially pays off here as a vehicle. I tried to emulate the same sort of flame effect back here as I captured up front, and I think it looks really sharp. The smokestacks are a little bit more defined as well, and I think that looks a lot more clean. Unfortunately, the back is a little bit messy and the head sticks out a little bit further, but ironically, I think the weapons kind of detract from that. There's so much junk back here that the head kind of gets lost in all of it, and I know some people aren't going to like it, but personally, I think it looks alright. There's also a gap, and I had to sacrifice the taillights, but I think all of that is definitely a price worth paying for solidity. In addition, I also built an effect part, this sort of explosion, some dirt being blown up, and Prime looks pretty cool driving out of a dust cloud. He seems to do that a whole lot in the movies, so it's fairly appropriate. And of course, he looks pretty amazing at the front of any kind of convoy of vehicles. Now, I don't plan on making updated instructions on this, but I like to think that the weapons and updated assemblies are fairly straightforward, so I wish you luck in figuring those out, and until next time, this has been Rollout, signing off.